You know what
Backpacking America
is, right?
It's fucking awesome.
It's Backpacking America, an analytical podcast. So no one really knows what pirate radio is today, and I find that really sad. So this mini series is gonna basically inform everyone about what it is, why it exists, and the people involved with it. So pirate radio first started in the 1960s with the idea that radio stations have control over the airwaves and regular people don't, and it's kind of boring. So people bought transmitters, and back then transmitters were really expensive. They were thousands of dollars. So you either had to be really wealthy or get a bunch of people together to throw money down to buy these transmitters. And essentially what they'd do is they'd scan the radio dial for an empty frequency, and they would tune their transmitter to broadcast on that frequency, and that would be their radio station. The issue is that even in America, this was against the FCC's rules. However, it was not against the law. So the FCC would come and try to take equipment, but they couldn't necessarily do that. That's why certain states made it law that you could not illegally broadcast, because there's no federal law against pirating a radio station. It's just a violation of an FCC rule. But still, the FCC would even sometimes illegally steal transmitters and broadcasting equipment, regardless if it's legal or not. States like New York, for example, it's incredibly illegal to broadcast through piracy, and can get you either a Class A misdemeanor if you're not intentionally pirating, or a felony if you are intentionally pirating because you're conspiring to commit a misdemeanor. So basically, it's today's day and age, it's very illegal in New York and I believe Florida and California to broadcast illegally. This all started too, in England, for example. They used to broadcast off of ships, and one of the ships is called Radio Caroline, and they would broadcast nonstop pop and all the music that everyone loved, and there was nothing really that the English authority could do because they were broadcasting off of the English coast. So they were out of jurisdiction of England and in international waters. So the English eventually passed laws banning this, and these ships were seized and sold off or junked. But the spirit of why they did these things was because it was fun, it was exciting, and it was, it gave purpose to people. People pirated radio, not just for the political end, but because they wanted to play music that people wanted to listen to. And because it gave an adrenaline rush, this is something that is yours, this is something we have power over, this is something that is unique to us and our community, and is not corporatized, and allows us to take back a little piece of our lives that are frequently dominated by corporations. It was really the most proletarian thing you could do, was pirate a radio station. And even today, piracy is making a comeback with transmitters and that are $150 to $200, and this mini series aims to cover why people pirate, how to pirate, and the differences between yesterday and today. Joining us today to discuss these issues and the different facets of pirate radio will be Monk, who was a pirate at KBFR out of Boulder, Colorado. He's going to be sharing with us his experiences and will be joining us for the next 3 episodes of our little mini-series here, where we explore the general basics of pirate radio, the political end of pirate radio, and the low-power FM movement. Okay, so my first question for you is, how was KBFR received in the local community?
Oh, KBFR we started it in 1999. And it ran until about 2004, 2005, right around there. And then it had several incarnations after that with different groups of people, but I ran the first incarnation of it. And then the equipment that I had purchased was used in those those next incarnations up through about, probably 2010, 2012, somewhere in there. So it kept running. So, and there are still pirate radio operators in Boulder, Colorado, which is where KBFR was. So the way people reacted to it was because radio was still a big deal. The internet hadn't really taken off. I mean, it had, but there wasn't a lot of media on it. There wasn't a lot of podcasts hadn't been invented yet. So radio still mattered, right? So we had somewhere around 45 to 50% of the community was listening to us regularly, because we found this out by going to auto shops in town and asking the guys who ran the auto shops what the radios were set to in the cars. And it was about half of all the cars in Boulder had KBFR as what they were set to. So we knew people were driving around town listening to KBFR, and it was real pirate radio, no commercials, kind of out there. We had some pretty wild stuff going on, and so it was super popular. We had probably at one point, probably 50 DJs, volunteer DJs, who had their own shows doing an incredibly wide range of stuff. It was all, driven by the community.
That's amazing. That's amazing. How did you, when you say incarnations, what do you mean? Like, was it shut down for a period of time, or?
Oh, well, yeah, all pirate radio gets shut down. I mean, we were running a 150 watt transmitter, so we covered all of Boulder, like any professional radio station. Plus, the guy I started with, I'm Monk, and his name, he went by Sparky, and he was a double E with a deep knowledge of RF, engineering, radio frequency engineering. So we ran the station like a professional station. The signal was crystal clear and clean. We used professional level equipment. The way it happened was in '99, they were about to start up low power FM, LPFM. They were about to start allowing licenses for small community stations to be born. And so I wanted to do that. So I ordered equipment from Europe, because you couldn't really buy it in America at the time. And the equipment was expensive. It was like $5,000, maybe $7,000, something like that total. And so I ordered the equipment because it took 6 or 8 months to get here. And when the equipment showed up, by that time, they had effectively gutted the LPFM law. And it was National Public Radio and National Association of Broadcasters, along with 2 senators, that these 2 organizations had effectively bought off. They had made it so you could only get a license within a 3rd adjacent channel, meaning you had to have 3 clicks between stations. So if you lived in an urban area where there was other stations, or frankly, where there were people, you couldn't get an LPFM license. So, which really pissed me off. So this equipment showed up. I couldn't get the license. So I could either put it up on eBay and lose some money, or I could say, fuck it. I'm going to turn it on. So I said, fuck it, I'm turning it on. And Sparky, I turned it on, and one day Sparky, he emailed me because I was announcing the email I was using, and he said, hey, you need to tune this thing. Your antenna's all screwed up. And I'm like, who the hell are you? And he told me who he was. And, like my initial contact with you, cautiously, we went through a dance to figure out if each other was real. And we finally met for coffee, and he was fantastic. I mean, basically, between he and I'm a software guy. So, a software and recording guy. So we had me on the studio side and him on the engineering side. And we had a real professional radio setup. And basically, it just took off from there. So that was the first incarnation. The second incarnation was after we got busted. About every 10 to 12 months, an FCC agent would show up. And the first time they showed up, this is where I figured out the FCC doesn't have any real power. Even in your states, like New York and New Jersey and Florida that have laws against pirate radio, the FCC still has no power. What all that they can do is they can give you a thing called a notice of apparent liability, which is a fine that they can give you that's up to $11,000 a day and up to a year in jail. But it turns out the FCC has no way to enforce that. They don't carry guns. They don't have badges. They can't arrest you. They can't shut you down. They can't do anything. They can't. So all they can do is fine you. And it turns out they don't really have any way to make the fine stick either, unless they can find a court someplace that will look at this and say, yeah, we're willing to enforce an FCC rule that doesn't happen to be a law anywhere. So other than New Jersey, New York, and Florida. So basically we figured this out. I had an FCC agent show up at my house. This is when I first started, where I was running the station from. And he came to the door. He said, yeah, this FCC, we think there's an illegal FM station here. And I looked at him, and I knew better than to talk to him. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I shut the door. And I went downstairs and I turned off the transmitter, and they waited around about 30 minutes and then they left. And I thought to myself, this is weird. So I did a bunch of research, and I figured out that if the transmitter's not on, they have no right to be there. They also have no right to be on your property at all, period, unless you invite them. So never, ever speak to an FCC agent. If they're on your property, ask them to get off. Tell them they're trespassing, and they have to. So what we figured out was that if we moved the station, every time we got an FCC visit, it reset the clock. You know, they couldn't say that it was the same station. They had to start over from the beginning. So they couldn't create a record saying this is the station, this is the guy. We can start fining him $11,000 a day, starting from here until, you know, he shuts it off. All you had to do is move it, and it started the clock over again. So we had a whole network set up of our DJs and our listeners, where we would take a box and we would put the transmitter in the box along with a laptop and a mixer and a cable that ran out of the back of the box up to the antenna, either in a tree or on the house's roof. And then we used a Wi-Fi connection to connect to the internet. And we had our studio in a different part of town, and we would stream from our studio to that box in somebody's backyard. And we put a big sign on the box, a big piece of tape across it that said ham radio repeater. And whenever the FCC would show up, they would knock on the door, and the people would answer the door, and the FCC would say, hey, you have an illegal transmitter. And they go, we don't know what you're talking about. And you say, oh, look, there's the antenna right there. Oh, no, that's the ham radio repeater. The FCC would say, no, that's an illegal FM station. And the people would act, oh my God, we didn't know that. They told us it was a ham radio repeater. And they would then take them around back, and they'd say it was a locked box. They couldn't open it, right? So they'd say, well, you know, it was a guy at a party who said he'd pay for our internet if we let him put this ham radio repeater here, you know, and connect to the internet. So yeah, we let him. We don't know who, you know, I don't remember his name. I don't even know his phone number. He just checks it once every month or two. So then the FCC would always say, hey, can we just take it then? And the people were instructed, no, it's not ours. And then they would unplug it. And the second they unplugged it, there was no reason for the FCC had no right to be there. And that's what they were instructed to say to the FCC. So, you know, we won't plug it back in. We'll get rid of this. We'll send it. We'll find the guy that owns it. I think Joey knows their number. Joey's not here. Yeah, we'll take it from there. And they'd call us. The FCC would leave. They'd call us, and we would have another place already set up with an antenna in place. And about 4 hours later, we'd be back on the air. So we did this for years, just years. And it worked great until the FCC figured out what they think they figured out what my real name was, and they came after me personally. It just so happens one of our DJs, who is a blues guitarist and a world-class First Amendment lawyer, decided to help us out when I got the letter from the FCC saying I was this guy. And I said, no, I'm not. And my lawyer buddy, who now is an assistant attorney general for one of the states here in America, helped us respond to the FCC, basically shutting them down. But I also knew at that point, you know, they were close enough to me to figuring out who I was that it probably wasn't worth continuing. So that's about the time. It was about 5 or 6 years into running the station. I figured, you know, it's time to either pass it on or to shut it down. So we decided to shut it down for a while. And I got contacted by some of my old DJs and some other people that really missed KBFR about probably 2 years later, year and a half later. And I passed all the equipment on to them.
So even after all these risks that, you know, Monk took, in trying to dodge the FCC, hide the transmitter, and keep his identity a secret. You know, even to this day, he decided to continue, at least in some way, being a part of pirate radio, and other people signed up to take the same risks and suffer the same consequences as he did in continuing piracy. And it's really down to what was said about why the DJs at Radio Carolina and the DJs at KBFR and this new online station in Brooklyn that actually broadcasts under a bridge in an RV, at KPIS. It's all the same reasons, because it's fun, and it's because it's a rush, and it's a challenge, and it's also your own media. It's a way to challenge these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates directly by providing media that people love. And it's really a wonderful activity. And I think that's why, we're seeing a resurgence in interest in pirate radio, and, why it has such a rich history in American culture, to the point where they had to make a movie about it called actually Pirate Radio, or there's also another one, Pumped Up Kicks. So basically, it's so empowering that people still signed up to run KBFR, even knowing all the risks. And there's even, with podcasts today, and before podcasts, online radio was a big thing in the early 2000s. It's because you get to have your voice aired and people actually want to listen to it. So that's why, I don't think the spirit of pirate radio died. It did not at all. Even though we are seeing a resurgence in smaller transmitters coming back into the market, and they're more affordable, which we will cover in the next episodes in the series in a more in-depth and nuanced level. The spirit of pirate radio has transited to the most popular format, which is podcasting. And it is absolutely amazing to see that spirit still exists. And it's, it makes sense, because in our society, it's, oh, this is a really great idea. And then a few years later, it's, how can we profit off of this? Which is why we're seeing, Michelle Obama with her podcast, and we see, syndication of podcasts. And, it's just, now it's becoming corporatized. And pretty soon it could be as heavily regulated as radio was. Because originally, radio wasn't regulated at all until the 1930s. So it's just something to really think about, that in our society, everything that becomes a benefit to humanity eventually becomes a benefit to corporations and profit. So with that, let's take a look at KPIS, who embodies the spirit of pirate radio but took on a new legal form of media dissemination for the people through online format.
What's up? You're listening to KPIS.FM, broadcasting live from Myrtle Beach, Brooklyn, under the M train from the Dodge Swinger Oceanside 1977 RV. My name is Sherry Barclay, and do I keep talking over the train? This is my internet radio station, KPIS.FM, a podcast recording studio, event space, and just general haven for freaks in Bushwick.
I put an envelope with $5,000 just right in the glove box there, and how about I send these guys over to you, because they want to take my toes.
They want to take your what?
Toes, my toes. My name is Drennan. I host Maximum Joy. I play, I guess, a wide spectrum of stuff that, I don't know that anybody really wants to listen to. 80s new wave, it's a lot of 70s punk, it's a lot of 90s alternative. I started the show today with this country song called I Might Have to Burn Atlanta Down by this guy, Ed Bruce, and it's so sick. I get 2 hours to come in here and just, I talk to nobody except for whoever happens to be listening. And, I make jokes about how, I'm inside of an RV, and, I let the space kind of inform, I guess, the tone.
I like KPIS because they stick to the gritty and open-ended resistance to falling in line and sticking to a profit motive when creating content. They are only about making sure they can play what they want to hear. That boldness builds an audience that is looking for obscure and weird. Regular corporate media cannot provide this content, so the niche audiences once again have to dig and look for what suits their tastes. This is also why podcasts are even more widespread than online stations like KPIS, because they are easier to access, produce, and find content that suits any interest or niche a listener has. While the experience of a radio station listening experience is fading, the tenets of media democracy are still alive in podcasting, and that is the most important thing. Monk explains his hand in building the early podcasts in 2004 and why the aspect of media freedom is still found online.
So I was involved with starting podcasting, and the thinking there was that there were several small companies that started, like Podcastage and Clickcaster, and I can't remember all the names now, but basically there were about a half a dozen of us that started doing audio, RSS feeds with audio on the internet, which is what a podcast is. And the word podcast had not been invented when we did this. And we did it because for us, it was pirate radio for the internet. That was the idea behind the initial podcasting startups. And you're absolutely right. These startups got some funding, they got going, but it didn't take off until about 5-6 years ago. And we started this stuff in about 2004, 2005-ish. It was when we were first starting audio, the creation, the initial podcasting out there. And it's only really taken off in the last probably 5 years, maybe even really 3 or 4 years. But it took a long time. It took, decade and a half for it to really start to take off from a format perspective. But this is normal. Whenever something starts to really take off and people start to really use them, what's the first thing that happens in a capitalist society? How do we monetize that, right? How do we make a buck off this? So that's why and then you see templates and you see people start copying each other who are making money already. How do we copy that and make money over here in this area? Let's redirect that into this niche using that model. So that's why you're seeing the same thing over and over again. Such and such did, like The Daily from the New York Times, right? That's the most popular podcast in America. It's a 30 to 40 minute deep dive into a specific subject every day, done by this guy. It's very good and it's very formulaic. It's a formula that everybody copies because it works and it's super popular and they can make a lot of money with it. And so it's not a big surprise in a capitalist society that happens. There's also a lot of crap out there too, if you think about it. There's some really bad podcasts out there.
And he's right. There are some really terrible podcasts out there. I mean, like, really bad. But anyway, I digress. This was basically the first episode of our mini-series where it was just the general overview of what pirate radio is. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about how pirate radio is used in political resistance. You definitely don't want to miss that one out. Thank you again so much for tuning in. Thanks for listening, y'all. Make sure to give BPA a follow on Instagram at Backpacking America and Twitter at BPA Podcasting. Make sure to like BPA on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. The links can be found in the podcast description. Until then, take it easy and stay breezy.